Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages.
Hi, this is Priyanka Lalwani, composer of the film The Strange Guest. And you are listening to me on the podcast Mysterious Goings On with the awesome host Alexander Greenwood. This podcast features writers and highlights their creativity, writing, and mystery. Check it out at mgopod.com.
The psychological thriller is a popular subgenre of the thriller genre, and I think people must love it. I've written a little bit of it myself. Regular listeners will know that. And I'm always excited to speak to a fellow traveler when it comes to psychological thrillers. I love to hear other writers tell me how they delve into the psychology of their characters as well as the thrills and the plot and everything else. So that's why we're excited to have Henya Drescher with us today. She comes from a rich cultural background. Born in France to Polish parents, she was raised in Israel and came to America at an early age. She's always wanted to write novels, and now with Stolen Truth, it has become a reality. She has short stories published in numerous magazines, and she's a regular contributor to Medium.com. And when she's not absorbed in writing her third novel and spending too much time on the computer, her passions include lifting weights, spinning, and cultivating her large garden. She and her husband live in New York City, and she right now is living in your earbuds as she is joining us on Mysterious Goings On. Welcome, Henya Drescher.
What a wonderful intro, Alex. Thank you very much for having me with you.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, I'm looking forward to talking with you.
I'm looking forward to speaking with you as well, Henya. Has it always been psychological thrillers for you?
Yes. Something about wanting to know and understand people and understanding where they come from, what makes them tick. It's just something that sort of segues me into writing psychological thriller, because as it says psychological thriller, so you get into your characters' minds, and this is what I like to do.
Have you written anything that's not specifically of that genre? And the reason I'm asking is I'd love to compare your experience as a writer trying to write, let's say, suspense versus psychological thriller.
Okay, so my first novel, which is based a little bit on a true story and slightly, and the novel is not published yet. I'll have to go and revisit it. But it's not a thriller, since it's based on a true story. It's about a woman back in the 70s who wanted to needed to make a lot of money, and she didn't have any skills. So she ends up down west, and she becomes a coal miner. And in the 70s, becoming a coal miner was not a pretty thing to do, because men did not welcome her with open arms and say, "We love you," kisses and hugs, and we are going to teach you. Actually, they tried to kill her along the way. They planted a bomb. Everybody got out of there. They didn't tell her. And somehow she got out of there by her skin and her teeth and whatever you call it. And she has a relationship with a woman. She falls in love with a woman. And you see the trial and tribulation between the two women and what they have to go through. Not only that they are in a culture that does not accept women in a man's world, now that they find out that she's also a lesbian, makes things even more difficult for them. So I wouldn't call it a psychological thriller. I started to get into writing psychological thrillers with my second novel. And you will deduce very quickly that I like to write about strong women. This one is a truck driver. So she drives across country to deliver a shipment to Las Vegas. Along the way, she gets hijacked by a Muslim who has his own vendetta to take care of. And you see the two of them sitting in a cabin for days and hours at a time. And what happens while they're doing that, even though he's a menace and she's a little bit afraid of him, that she gets to know him, and I get into his head, and I get into why he's doing what he's doing, what his background is, what happened to his family back home, with a stray bomb from an American plane leveling his house, and he's the only thing left, the only person left alive. So that's when I decided, yeah, I like that. I like to get into people's mind. And given my background, I am a daughter of a survivor, a Holocaust survivor. So, yeah. So, living and being raised in a dysfunctional settings, I became very aware of my surroundings. I became aware of body language. I became aware of anything that I shouldn't say or shouldn't do because the repercussions would be lethal. And not that my parents were bad people, just that the circumstances were so horrible. My father was in Auschwitz, and he somehow survived, but he was not a full rounded person. He was a good man, but he just didn't know how to go about life. So being a watchful child and learning how to navigate my way around them, that's when I grew up to watch everybody else. And so why not put it down on paper? And that's exactly what I did. And I have a lot of fun with doing that. So this is another segue about the novel that, I'm going to discuss with you today, that actually I'm working on my fourth novel now, and of course it is a psychological thriller. But so this novel, Stolen Truth, is my only published novel. I do write, as I told you, I do write short stories,
Yeah.
and I write articles, and most of my articles are political material, stuff that I cannot talk to my friends about, stuff that I cannot voice, because we pretty much are all stunted in one way or another. I'm not going to get political here. So I find that this is an outlet for me in the most gentle way possible without pointing fingers, is to bring my point across and tell people to look at things from a different direction. It is not black and white. There are a lot of gray shades. Why not look at the gray shades? Why not expand your horizon and read more and form your own opinion, and don't listen to one television news. Read and watch and listen and talk and listen and listen and listen and listen. Listening, I find, is my best material because this is how I get to know people. I'm not a talker, although you would never know, by the way. So actually, I'm talking about my favorite subject, so I can pretty much let myself go loose. So going
Absolutely.
back, yes, yes. So going back to my novel, my published novel is actually about a woman who tells us that she wakes up and her husband and a baby, a 6 days old baby, disappeared. So when she calls the police and they come to the house, they look around and they say, it looks like nobody else lived here but you. There are no clothes, no baby furniture, no baby clothing, no pictures, no birth certificate, no marriage license. We can help you. And so she's desperate. She turns to her family. They don't believe her either, given that years earlier she suffered from a false pregnancy. She believed that she was pregnant. So why should we believe you now? Something is wrong. You need to find help, go to a psychiatrist, talk to somebody about it. So left abandoned like this, she takes it upon herself to go to look for her baby and a husband. But all along throughout the journey, we don't really know whether to believe or not. So we actually following an unreliable narrator. Is she right? Is she psychotic? Is she delusional? What is going on with her? Not until the end. So this is what I like about psychological thriller, where you take that invisible thread and you pull your readers along with you slowly, 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 and the tension gets higher and higher until there's got to be a release somewhere, but you have to get to the end to find out what that release is. So basically, this is what I like about it. And so, and and also the way I write my novels is not cut and dry. It's lyrical. The language itself is lyrical. So I like to paint pictures as opposed to writing pictures. So I paint them. So I don't know if I told you, we actually live in New York, but since COVID, we have a house up in the mountains. It's very secluded.
Oh, nice.
It's in the Berkshires, it's in the mountains. So what I wanted to do is when I wrote this book, so this is an idyllic place. It's quiet. You hear the birds chirping in the morning. This is what you wake up to, not an alarm clock. They start at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and up you are. What you're hearing is the trees wishing back and forth, the wind, between the leaves, the green, the trees, the quiet, the peace. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take that characters and place her in the middle of this peaceful place and create chaos.
Nice.
Yes.
Interesting. I think it's interesting to find somebody who is a chaotic character and you're putting them in this idyllic, tranquil atmosphere. Does the character desperately need chaos and that therefore creates it, or is it something else?
No, she was thrown into it, and only because of her need to want to be married, her need to want to have a family, her need to create a nice life of her own. And she actually lived in an area where I'm living because I can see it, I can visualize it, I can do that, and I can paint that picture. So she did not bring chaos into it. She found herself in the middle of chaos.
Interesting. Let me ask you a little bit about Stolen Truth in particular, about the writing process for you. How long did it take you to get it together where you were satisfied with it?
Years.
Years.
How many years? Yes, years. I'm not a very fast writer. I'm a contemplator, and I'm a perfectionist. Now, I have quite a few friends who are writers. They drum up one a year, one book a year. And I'm thinking, how is it possible to do that? Well, first of all, they don't write in my genre.
Right.
Secondly, what I like to do is I like to paint myself into a corner and then get myself out of it.
I like that.
So how to do that, it takes a lot of thought and a lot of contemplation and a lot of maneuvering, and especially writing about stuff that I don't know. So research, and now the book that I'm writing now is even more complicated than Stolen Truth, which I can touch upon a little bit later. But so it takes me a long time. This book took me about 4 years to write. So 1 year to do the research. And that means that I found myself in a pretty dangerous area. While I was investigating some of the material that I needed to put in a book, I actually went to a compound to research.
Oh.
And I found myself being chased by a truck with guns down a hill.
Oh my gosh.
And so that took me time to try. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because that sort of tells you a little bit about the end. So
Aha.
so this is all I'm going to tell you about that, but just gives you an idea of research when you take it very seriously. Like with my first book, I actually went to a coal mine, and I went into a coal mine to see what it feels like in there. So I need to feel it and experience it. And I'm not that unique about that. I know quite a few friends who are writers who need to learn about things. That's what they do. But again, it depends what you're writing about. If you're writing a romance novel, okay, there might be a little research there, but when it comes to something that are pretty technical and things that you don't know about, it does take time to learn things like that.
Yeah. Do you find the research as rewarding as putting the words down?
I find the research more rewarding than putting the words down. And actually, writing, for me, writing is very painful because I write about painful stuff.
Yeah.
And I write about the angst and the pain and the emotionality that my characters go through. But what I like the best is editing. When I edit, and I put in the scenes and the sky and the rain that's out there right now, and I describe all of it. I can take the rain and take one page to describe just the rain, but what I do is I integrate it with the emotion and the feeling of my character at the moment. So actually, nature for me is a character.
I like that. Yeah, I enjoy the editing process as well. I view it this way when I work on my books. And incidentally, before I complete that thought, I went through a period where I wrote one book after the other for about 3 years in a row, and that burned me out. I couldn't do it. It started taking me 2-3 years to get a book together. But my process is, I kind of feel like you're getting the lump of clay on the table first of all, which is just the first draft, and then the editing process is where you find the sculpture underneath. That's how I view it. Do you have a set schedule when you're writing? Do you get up at a certain time, or is it a little more left to chance, or what else?
That is a wonderful question, actually. No, I don't have a schedule at all. I go by my feelings. I go by my moods. I can find myself saying, okay, I'm going to sit down and write today, but instead I go downstairs to the kitchen and I cook. But I can wash the floor and I can clean the house, but at the same time I'm thinking and I'm plotting in my head. I have my whole book in my head. I know some people are you a prankster? Do you put down what
I'm
you're going?
No, I'm a pantser. I have a general idea, but I don't outline. I just can't, because I tried it once and I don't stick to the outline anyway. So
Exactly, exactly. I mean, I know some people are some writers that I have friends are trying to talk me into that. And they say that if you do that, then, your movement is going to be more rapid. To finish the novel would be faster. I cannot do that. I tried it and I find it's a waste of my time.
yeah.
So I think about it. I don't know if the same thing happens to you. I dream sentences and I'm thinking, you do? Do you do that?
Yeah, I do, and it's the weirdest thing. I don't do it all the time, but it does happen, and I dream of whole scenes from the book. And you know what? It's funny, Henya, for you asking me that, because I've asked that question to numerous writers. I said, "Do you dream about your work?" And most of them say no, which is interesting.
And you know what happens? I wake up in the morning and I say, wow, I wish I could write that well.
Yeah,
My writing in my dreams are so beautiful.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and that's all I remember, that while I'm dreaming, I remember thinking to myself, wow, Henya, you're such a good writer. I wish that I would remember when I wake up so I can jot it down. I wish there was a way for me to attach something to my head and record it as I'm dreaming about it. So I'm not the only one. I'm not that unique. You do the same thing.
You know where it comes to me as well is I'm especially during the recent lockdown. I hike a lot and walk a lot, and I through nature. And it seems by just getting out there and doing something physical, but that's not too taxing, in the peace and quiet of nature, a stray sentence will fly at me, and I'll get out my phone and I'll use the phone notes app and I'll type it in. And then some days I'll look at it later and go, what the heck did, he bought gelato on Sesame Street mean? But it's what happens.
That's so funny. Yes, hiking and walking and doing some stuff that does not really involve your mind frees you and opens up, all the blockage that
Yeah.
most of us have a lot of the times. And the interesting thing that I was complaining to my husband this morning, I said, I really don't feel like writing today. And yesterday I didn't really write much. And his answer was, so relax, take it easy, don't force yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you force yourself, it's not going to come to you. So just take it easy. However, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, please.
However, my situation is a little unique. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because I love reading and writing. Some people out there might want to do it for the money, and they feel the pressure of producing more and more. So maybe not having that pressure frees me to do it at my own pace and my own time. Do you feel pressure to write?
No, I would have to have. I mean, writing is not my full-time job, nor is podcasting. I have a day job. I'm a consultant and a contractor. So the way I look at it, the money's is nice. It's like a bonus, though. Because when I write a book, I get to express myself and do what I love to do. And then if I sell a few, it's very nice because, let's take the family out to a nice dinner, or, reinvest it and do some advertising and try to make more money. But yeah, to answer your question in a roundabout way, no, I would very much love to have enough skin in the game, so to speak, where money became an issue, if that makes sense. If I had ever made it to any kind of a bestseller list where there was some actual money being made, I think I would feel pressure with each succeeding book, because I'd be like, wow, this book was a bestseller, or a top seller at least, and now this new one's got to be too. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And while you are talking, I'm thinking about, all of us talk about the 1% rich people how on top. The same thing with books. You get the same people who've been there for 20, 30, 40, whatever, how many years, that they are the ones who get the recognition. And for writers who are not known and don't have a name established yet, and I read an article the other day about that, the numbers are staggering. It's almost impossible. And especially after COVID and during COVID, everybody wants to become a writer.
Yeah.
You have, I think, something like, correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember correctly, maybe 1 million books are being submitted a week.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, so many. And that's why a lot of people are self-publishing, but it's just like swimming against the tide. So with that, with that in mind, and also I'm not too keen on promoting myself. I don't like doing that. I'd rather, it's wonderful talking to you. It's really great.
I made a face at Henya. It's like, oh, really?
That's why I corrected myself very quickly. I'm actually enjoying this a lot. You're wonderful.
Thank you.
I feel very comfortable with you. I'm talking about going on the internet every day and saying, look at me, look at my book.
Yeah.
My book is wonderful. And then 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people are doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like dropping a needle into a haystack and then going to look for it. It's impossible. So I try to not pressure myself and just enjoy the process. I started looking at your books. Actually, I ordered one of your books. I forget which one, because I looked at your your website.
Sure.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to reading it.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
how many books you have now that you've written?
There's the eighth one of my mystery series comes out on Halloween of this year. And I've also written a couple of ebooks, and I co-wrote with, technically co-wrote with my deceased grandfather. He wrote Westerns. He was a traditionally published Western writer for 50 years. I took one of his last manuscripts that didn't get published and finished it for him. And so I guess you could say I've got 9 actual books and then a couple of ebooks that are, nonfiction stuff. So I've got a few things out there, and I appreciate again you picking something up. I hope you like it.
Yes, and absolutely. So you write in a genre that is very similar to mine.
Yes, yeah, and
Yes.
there are overtones, Henya, in mine. As a matter of fact, because my lead character in my series has a very I won't give it away too much, but he has a very much an ongoing dialogue with himself, and so there's a lot of psychology in there in these books as well. But they're not nearly up to snuff to call them psychological thrillers. I just call them flat out mystery thrillers.
Yeah, so my genre is a subgenre, obviously, so, but, what I like about psychological thrillers that they engage the intellect,
Yes.
literally engage the intellect. And so as an author, I go out there and I introduce characters and I build my characters to a crescendo that, with clues. Of course, you put clues in there and just where to put them. And this is the toughest thing to do, is how much to put in, how many clues and where to place them without giving away anything.
Yeah.
It's like, if you give your character a gun, you know that they have to use it. But how many times I read a book that you give them a gun and they never shoot it?
Yeah, that's that they'll think Chekhov's gun in a stage play. Yeah, if you have a gun, you better use it in the show, in the play, or in the book. Right. I agree. Yeah, that's interesting too. I the same thing. That's one thing I do enjoy about the process as well, is to go back and make sure that the clues are not too much. Like I know for a fact in one of my earlier books, I telegraphed so badly what was going to happen that people told me, well, the mystery wasn't such a big deal, but we liked the characters and it was fun. And I thought, okay. And that's when I realized, Henya, that I'm much better at just putting, I think, okay, this is just my opinion, I'm much better at putting interesting characters into mysterious situations. And that's kind of how I write my books. So you, though, with the psychological thriller, it's a completely different outlook, because tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. I'm curious. I mean, a psychological thriller, it strikes me as there's not a lot of room for humor and lightness within those kind of stories. Or am I completely wrong about that?
I find that I need to have some kind of a release where it's not all high tension. So what I do is I bring in a character who has a sense of humor.
Nice.
And what I like to do with that character, that it eggs and it keeps needling the main character in a way to bring certain things out of that character that otherwise wouldn't come out.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I don't like to do is include any sexual material in there. I will allude to it. And I like to leave enough for my audience attention. I mean, for them to try to use their own mind to build their own way of what it looks like. Right. So that kind of love making. So I like to do that. But the lightness comes in, not too heavy. So because otherwise it's too... And is your genre the same way, where it's very fast-paced?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to move very fast, and the dialogue has to be punchy, and not, good morning, how are you, type of a thing. Yeah, exactly.
And mine are terribly dialogue heavy. I don't spend a great deal of time describing what people wear or anything like that. I view my job is just keep the story moving, but I'm better at keeping the story moving through the words of the characters than I am through my narrative skills. But that's just me, you know.
And I happen to agree with you. And I'm thinking, because I belong to a critique group and for many, many years now. And with this book that I'm writing, they help me out and we help each other. And they keep saying, I don't know what she looks like. And I'm thinking, so what? You know how she behaves, you know how she feels. Every so often I say she takes her hair, curly hair, and she puts it back. So I do something minute
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
Since she's an intelligence officer that just got back from Afghanistan. So I dress her in, the kind of clothes that she comes back as a soldier. She still, behaves like a soldier. She still carries a gun.
Yeah.
So this is how I like for my readers to look at my characters through, how they behave. Maybe they wear fatigue, pants. So that immediately shows you that she's tough.
Right.
Carries a gun, she's tough. But no, not stuff like that. Not what people wear.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. One thing I've worked on too is to make sure that when he solves a mystery or survives a situation, that often it's not always it's either through his wits, or just it could even be by luck, because that's real. That's real. I mean, sometimes we just get out by the skin of our teeth just because we got lucky, and that happens to my guy a couple of times. But one thing I'm really cognizant of is that he's kind of an everyman, and he's very flawed in his own way. So I don't build a lot of gunplay with him. He's used a gun here and there, but he's more likely to pick up a gun and miss if he's going to shoot something or someone. I think that's more realistic and more fun. I've never been interested in writing like a real superhero type lead character, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that about yours, by the way. I just mean,
I hear you.
yeah, I want to write. I think to a degree I probably write a guy who's similar to myself, to be honest. But he doesn't lack courage, but he does lack the skills that somebody might have from a different background. So, but I think that's interesting too, that I feel the same way about sexual content. I mean, there is some in my books, but I'm not wild about writing, every detail of the sex act into the story. I like what you said. I like to allude to it, and I think people use their imagination the same way they could use their imagination about how my characters look. I'll do this one thing, Henya, and then I'll stop talking for a second here. Sorry. You got me excited about this, so here I go. But I do
Alex, I enjoy listening to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, hopefully the audience does. Okay, so I do assign at least one physical characteristic to every character. So, for example, one character, her name's Kate. She's got dirty blonde hair. And a nice caboose. She's got a nice rear end. Okay, those are the things that you know about her. You can fill in all the rest of the blanks, right? But my lead character, John Pilot, I really never describe anything. You get the feeling he's a Caucasian male who's approaching 40. That's about all you know about the guy. So anyway, I think that's fascinating and fun, because every reader I speak to has a different version of what this guy must look like.
Exactly. And there's so many other ways to show what a person looks like. For instance, two characters get together. She's looking up at him, or he's looking down at her. So or even with two women, one is tall and one is short. There's so many other ways of doing it.
Yeah.
In a roundabout way. So readers are very smart. We don't have to feed them with a spoon. Readers like to be detectives. This is what's so interesting about our genres, is that we engage the reader, but we also bring them in and we invite them in and say, okay, come with us and try and solve it with us.
Right.
So they become an active reader, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to go to sleep now. It's enough already. Yeah.
What about okay? And I know we're getting close on time, but I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'd love to ask you just a quick question though about your short story writing. Is it short fiction you write, or is it just essays and things, or do you actually write some short fiction as well?
I wrote quite a bit short fiction, and a couple of them from Israel, showing what happens when a bomb went off, short stories like 2 pages. But right now, what I enjoy, and I had quite a few, and I wrote about my family, which was published in a couple of magazines. But what I like to do now is when I say, wow, I don't really feel like delving into, and it's just too complicated now, and I need to get a break from it, is I write on medium.com. I'm sure you heard of Medium. So
I do too.
Oh, you do too? Okay. We have to, I'll look for you.
I'll find you.
Yes, so you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, what I like about medium.com is that it gives me a time off for my novel.
Yeah.
And it gives me instant gratification, which we don't get from writing a novel. This is instant gratification. So I don't feel depressed. I have a tendency to go in that direction every so often. So then I go into that and I put it on Medium, and I have a lot of people that follow me, and I follow a lot of other people, and I get that, interaction. So I feel so good. I say, okay, now I can go back to my book.
Absolutely, I'm the same way, and I'm exactly the same way. And I'm looking forward to this book. Is my latest book is in the hands of my editor. I have a developmental editor who's looking at it now, and he'll turn it back to me in a couple of weeks, and I'll make the changes and polish it up, and then send it off to my copy editor. But in the meantime, I'm sitting here thinking, twiddling my thumbs and feeling a little uncomfortable, like I need to write something. So I've written some stuff on Medium, and I'm also going to work on some short story stuff, just a kind of a palate cleanser, mental palate cleanser is, I think, what we're both talking about here. Well, Henya, I've really enjoyed speaking with you about Stolen Truth and about your process and about all your fascinating life and how you have managed, if I'm reading between the lines appropriately, how you've managed to take a traumatic childhood to a large degree, and you've developed some ways to navigate life, obviously, as people who suffer childhood and trauma do, but also you've managed to make it a very sharp tool in your writer's toolbox.
Thank you, Alex. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
I've enjoyed speaking with you. Oh, thank you. Well, I'm so glad that you joined us in Stolen Truth. There'll be links in the show notes at mgopod.com. Henya, I didn't even ask you this. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's henyadrescher.com, correct? Is that where we go?
Yes, correct.
Okay. We will go there, and I will put her other links for you at mgopod.com in the show notes. And again, the book is Stolen Truth, and the writer is Henya Drescher, and she is also the recipient of a Please Come Back with Your Next Novel invitation.
Thank you very much, Alex. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
You know, I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I gotta tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I got to tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account. Get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On.
Okay, who has a podcast, then writes an ebook about podcasting and doesn't do an audiobook version of it? Well, not me. I've done that. In fact, I'm very excited to tell you, dear listeners, that the podcast option, my recent top-selling ebook on podcasting, my journey through 15 years as a podcaster, broadcaster, host, guest, and observer, is now an Audible audiobook. It's really, really, really exciting for me to be able to present this to you through Audible, which is available on Amazon.com, where the ebook link is as well. And in this fast listen, my experience comes to you through stories, practical tips, and advice from my hundreds of hours as a guest, producer, podcast host, and more. And the podcast option, if I say so myself, is mandatory listening for those new to podcasting, and it should be a welcome addition to veteran podcasters' libraries. So check out the podcast option read by yours truly, Alex Greenwood, or as they say there, the J. Alexander Greenwood, because that's my pen name, and that's a long story, which if you dig through my podcast, eventually you'll find out what that means. But the point being today, the podcast option is available now as an Audible audiobook. I've got a link in the show notes to make it easy for you. Please do me a favor, go get that audiobook. Or if audiobooks aren't your bag, there's also a link for you to get it as an ebook. Again, the podcast option. I certainly hope you will choose it.
Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.